Good afternoon, learners of Grade 10. My name is Mr. Yilo, the subject advisor of economics in Moteo District. So today we have gathered again to do a topic titled The Population and the Labor Force. This is one of the topics that is covered in Term 3. Now, before we start the topic, please gather all the resources that you need so that you may be able to follow this presentation through. Now, let us not waste any time. Remember I said that we are doing the population and the labor force. So let us look at what the population is. So when we talk about the population, population refers to the number of people in a single area, whether it be a city or a town, a region, a country, or even the world. That is the population. So the process of counting the population, of counting the number of people in a country is called census. Now, census are very expensive, and therefore, the population survey is done every 5 years because it's expensive. Now, South Africa has a heterogeneous population with different races, cultures, regions, and 11 languages. Now, as of today, the population in South Africa is 60.14 million people. So we really are going to look at what are those factors that really cause population in a country to increase, or what are those factors that have got a direct impact on the population of a country, and maybe how does population affect the livelihood of the people within the country. Now, let us get started. Let's look at the population growth. So, it is very important that when we talk about population growth, we must understand what influences the population growth. So population growth is influenced by two things. Number one, by birth rates, in bracket fertility, which means the number of kids that are born, and the death rates, which is mortality, that is the number of people that dies in a year, in a period of a year. However, population does not really increase as a result of birth, but also we may also look at the issues around migration. And now migration is the inflow and even the outflow of the people from and to other countries, because those that are coming into the country from other countries are increasing the population. However, those that are leaving a country are decreasing the population. Same as those that are born, they increase population, and those that are dying, they reduce population. So we have what we call a natural growth rate. So natural growth rate is the difference between the births and the deaths in a country's population. That means when we calculate the natural growth, we say number of those that are born in a year minus a number of those that died in that specific year. And that would give us the natural growth rate. And also the overall growth. When we do the overall growth, when we do the overall growth, we take migration into account this time. So when we take a migration into account, that means we would calculate that by emigration minus immigration, and then that would give us our overall growth. So remember that emigration and immigration refers to really those that are coming into the country and those that are leaving our country into other countries. Now, the factors that are contributing to high population growth. What are those factors that contributes to high population growth? Number one, it is poverty. So poverty is one of the contributing factors to high population growth. In many poverty-stricken areas, you find that because people are unemployed, they do not have perhaps anything to do, you find those people having a lot of time to themselves, and they end up making a lot of babies. Secondly, lack of access to education. When people do not have education, they act recklessly sometimes, because sometimes education is important because it teaches people the importance of the importance of birth control, the importance of not having many kids as it would impact the economy and as it would even impact our livelihood. So lack of education also plays a role, where people really are having babies and not even being aware of what are the consequences of having a large number of babies. And then women with low status also are a contributing factor to high population growth. Children which are needed for labor in other countries would find that people are making babies only because they want those babies because of what they want them to do in labor-wise. In other words, they're making babies because they want these babies to come and work. So it's another contributing factor to the population growth. However, there are strategies that would reduce population growth. And one of those strategies is to improve the living conditions of the people through education. As I have said, that lack of education causes population growth. So it is very important that the lives of the people or the living conditions of the people should be improved, and particularly this time through education. People must be educated about the importance of birth control, about the importance of preventing, about the importance of birth control, healthcare, and also the incomes. It's very much important. The effective family planning and birth control strategies should be implemented in all households so that population must not grow at a rate that is faster than the economic growth, because at the end of the day, if the population is growing at a rate that is more faster than economic growth, it really would not yield any desirable results, nor will it impact our country positively. Now, let us now look at the demographic cycle. Demographic cycle, first, before we look at the demographic cycle, I want us to look at what the demography is. So the demography is the study of population, including their size and change over time, and their age and gender composition. That is what demography is. And I want to repeat, demography is the study of population, including the size of the population, how big the population is in a country, the changes in such population over time, the age of the people, and the gender composition in that specific region or in that specific country. So this is our demography cycle, which we will explain it in different stages. What you need to observe is that in this graph here, we have 5 stages of demographic cycle. So it is very important for you as a learner to understand what is happening in each stage of the cycle. For you to understand this graph, you need to understand what exactly happens in each stage of this table, of this graph, and then you realize that on your other axis, you have the natural population growth, and the other axis you have time. So let us look at now what happens in each stage. And I will try not to be too fast, because today's lesson really is not going to be very long. So now, remember earlier we said that the natural population growth is expressed as a natural growth rate. And the natural growth rate of any population, it shows a long-term cyclical pattern. So when we say it shows a long-term cyclical pattern, one would go back to this graph, and if you can see that this is a long-term cycle where it starts from the low and it goes up until it reaches the peak, and then from the peak the cycle starts to decline until it moderates again. So that is what we mean when we say that it is a long-term cyclical pattern. Now, this cyclical pattern is known as the demographic cycle, and the demographic cycle is divided into 5 phases. Remember, we said these phases are those that you need to know what happens under each phase of this cycle. Now, I want us to quickly look at the first cycle of the demographic cycle. In the first phase of the demographic cycle, during this phase, there is no birth control and birth rate is very high. So in this phase, in the very first phase of the demographic cycle, people are not using birth control, And as a result of them not using birth control, there is a high rate of people that are giving birth to children. And then the community is poor. And there is an absence of medical facilities and even the medical care. So one would say in the first phase, people are really not using any birth controls, and at the same time, people would not even prevent, because now they do not have medical facilities where they would be able to at least subscribe to those family planning programs or whatever. And then, so as a result of that, there is a high rate of people that are giving birth, as well as a high rate of those people that are dying. Because the other thing that happens during the first phase is that death rate is also very high. And as a result of that, why is it that people are dying? People are dying because, remember, we said there is an absence of medical facilities. So therefore, because now there is poor health care for people, people are dying in their large numbers, in as much as they are giving birth in their large numbers. And even the average age of population is very low. What do we mean when we say the average age of population is very low? We mean that if you look at perhaps people that are living, they are living maybe up to their 30s and the 40s. You hardly find people living up to the 50s, 60s, and 70s because of the absence of those medical facilities which would at least help them to sustain their lives. So that is where now we can bring about the issue of, that is where we can bring in the issue of, what is this term? I just happen now to forget the term, but I will bring it in as I remember it. Let us look at the second phase. The second phase of the demographic life cycle is that during this phase, birth control and family planning are not practiced. People are still not practicing birth control, and then birth rate remains high. And as the birth rate remains high, there is some improvement in the living conditions of people. So one can expect that during the second phase, at least medical care is there for people. And because now there is medical care for people, then you find that the death of the mothers and the children starts to decrease. So because people are not dying at the large numbers, however, people are giving birth at large numbers, it means now that the population growth increases. So the population, people can now live up to an average age of, up to an older average age. That is the natural growth rate is higher than in the first phase. So when you look here on our graph, this is the second phase. Remember now, in the second phase, people are still not practicing what? People are still not practicing birth controls, and at the same time, there are some medical facilities which now are really helping to sustain the lives of people, and people that are dying are less because of some improvement in the standard of living of people. And therefore, the population is growing. There is a huge growth in population as compared to what happens in the first phase. And then, if we would look now at the average age is that in this stage you find that an average age of an older, we have an older average age, and that means the natural growth rate is higher than in the first phase, as I have alluded to earlier on. Now let us look at the third phase. In the third phase is divided into two phases, or it is divided into two parts. So what happens in the first part is that in the first part, let me quickly go to the graph itself so that we look at the third phase. Remember, here is the third phase. The third phase is divided into two phases. One can see from here up to here, there is an increase in the population, but from here, from the peak, it starts to decline up to this point. So hence we say that it has two parts. The first part is a part where there is still growth, and the other half of this is the part where now population starts to decrease. So we are going to explain what causes that slight increase in the third stage, and what causes that slight decrease in, again, the third phase. So in the first part, the income and the standard of living of the people improves for the large part of the population. So which means a large majority of the population is experiencing improvement in their income as well as in their standard of living. And then this results in social developments and acceptance of the new values by the families, which cause decrease in the births. So what happens now there is that people are starting to accept the new values. They start to accept the fact that they need to practice birth control. And as they start to accept these new values, then what happens is that families now start to at least many families do no longer give birth as much as they would do in olden ages. Now, a decrease in the death, there is also a decrease in the death, which also occurs at a faster rate, which causes the natural growth rate to be high. So at that first part, now, because there is an improvement in the standard of living, in the income of the people, people have started to accept the new values. What happens is that, and there is, of course, medical care that is provided to people. We realize now that people are not dying in the large numbers. People are dying at a very slow pace. However, now people are starting to realize how the importance of giving birth, the importance of taking birth control. Now, what happens is that the natural growth rate becomes high. The second part of it is that the birth rate decreases faster than the natural death, and the natural growth starts to decrease. So because now the birth rate is also starting to decrease, and than the natural death, and the natural growth now is starting to decrease. This is what happens from the peak of this graph here. It shows now that people are no longer giving birth at large rates, and then the death is also decreasing, and as a result we start to see the decrease in the population demographics or population growth. The second part, that is what we have just mentioned now, and then we look at the fourth phase of the demographic cycle. At this stage, what happens now? At this phase, birth rate has decreased rapidly. People realize that their standard of living can be substantially increased if they have fewer children. Now people start to realize that the lesser number of kids they have, the more they can live the better life. And as a result, they start to subscribe to family planning, and then they accept family planning, and then the natural population growth starts to decrease. And that really is what is happening at this phase, where now you realize that in the fourth phase, the population growth is decreasing, because now people are aware that in order for them to live a better life, they need to make at least less number of babies, and they need to make less number of babies, and they are also accepting the birth controls. And maybe they have better education around the issue of population, So what happens in this fourth stage? You realize that the black people are still the ones that are high there, much as they have realized that they need to make low babies. But you find that blacks are still the ones whom are leading in terms of giving birth, followed by brown people, which I believe those are the coloreds, and then the Indians are down there, are the ones that really now are not giving birth in large numbers as compared to the coloreds and the black people. So let us now move to the fifth stage of the population of the demographic cycle. The fifth stage of the demographic cycle, during this phase, natural growth rate is very low, and it starts to level out. And then birth and death rates are very low. People are not giving birth in their large numbers, and even people are not dying in their large numbers. So the average age of a population starts to increase. This means now that people start to live for a very long time, In other words, up to 60s, 70s, sometimes even 80s, these are known as those old population. So that is what happens in the 5th stage. We have discussed all the 5 stages of demographic cycles. Remember, I said all you need to know what happens under each stage of the demographic cycle. That's just how important it is. And then let us look now at the projected growth rates. When we look at the projected growth rates, now the size of the population changes as a result of natural growth. However, even though the size of the population changes as a result of natural growth, it is affected also by external forces such as illnesses that are existing. Such illnesses would be your HIV/AIDS, your TB, malaria, and also net migration. And I think nowadays we can also include COVID-19 because it has had a huge impact even on the population of different countries. Now, let us look at what impact does HIV and AIDS have for population growth. So, the impact of HIV is that in Africa has high rates of HIV and AIDS. And maybe one would really say it's because of lack of education in Africa, lack of proper health care in Africa. South Africa is the country with large number of infected people in the world. Nevertheless, infection rate has stabilized and the number of newly infected people has decreased since 1999. And one would say this is due to maybe the availability of the antiretroviral pills, which has really decreased the number of new infections and also which has decreased the number of people that are dying as a result of HIV and AIDS. So HIV and AIDS have had a severe impact on the standard of living of the households that are affected. Because such people, they lose income earners. You find that someone was a breadwinner and as a result of HIV and AIDS, they die, and as a result, a household becomes affected because now they have lost an income earner or a breadwinner, and the experience increase in the increase in medical expenses. So again, you find that some households are affected because now their medical expenses are increasing as a result of HIV and AIDS. Having to deal or having to take care of a person who has HIV and AIDS, you need to always buy them the best medication, give them the best diet and all that. And then they spend less on food and other essentials. Remember, because a lot of money now would be used in order to care for a sick person. This impacts the health of other household members as well. The impact of HIV on businesses. HIV and AIDS has impact on businesses. So business profitability is affected due to the declining productivity and absenteeism. So what we know is that a business cannot be productive if it does not have skilled workers. So HIV and AIDS has the tendency of taking away the skilled workers. Some of them, they might be absent from work due to sickness, and then as a result, or some of them, they die. And as they die, the business will have to replace them. But replacing a skilled worker for business does not happen overnight. So which means a business would incur some costs because they need to train new employees, which will replace those that are sick or even those that are deceased, which means those that have died. And some businesses may even assist with antiretroviral drugs and other medicines. So some businesses really, as part of their benefits, they would also even provide a medical aid, of which sometimes they would even cover for people who have got HIV and AIDS, which costs business more money. Now, we can look at the impact of HIV and AIDS on the economy. What impact does HIV/AIDS have to the economy? HIV/AIDS claims a large portion of the people whom are between the age of 25 and 40 years. So most of the people that you find are infected by the disease, you'd find that are those that are the productive workforce, and they are always between the age of 25 and 40. So it takes away the trained and the productive workforce, as they have to be homesick or sometimes they die as a result of the disease. So a number of skilled workers is deteriorating in the country, and there is no way that our country can be able to grow, or the economy of our country can grow, if we really do not have productive workforce, because the economic growth is measured by the productivity of the country, by the productivity of the businesses. And if people who should be productive productive workers within the businesses are sick as a result of the disease, businesses really would not be able to produce as much as they can or they should. So the medical aid and other costs associated with HIV/AIDS are becoming so high that will cripple the economy of the country. So now the government has got to make available ARVs to everyone within the country. However, in as much as the government provides this medication to people in the country, it really doesn't mean that they come for free. Remember, they have to be funded from the revenue of the state. And if more money is channeled towards medication for HIV, and which is so costly, then it means the country will not be able to cover other things that needs to be covered, such as infrastructure, other social services within the country, and as a result, the country becomes crippled. Ladies and gentlemen, next time when we meet, we are going to do the labor force. So for today, really, as I said, this lesson was very short. The next session will be looking at the labor force, which really will be the second part of this topic, and we will finish it within an hour. So when we add these two videos, they would give us one complete lesson. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Remember, COVID-19 is still with us. Keep a good social distancing. Wash your hands, sanitize, and put your masks on. From my side, good luck with your upcoming test for Term 3, and good luck even as you prepare for your final year examination. Thank you very much.